Hey, what's going on, you guys? It's Ace. Hi. I'm back. I'm bringing you guys another off video. So this one's another requested video before we get into our whole Roman Civil War series. That does start tomorrow, by the way. So I'm talking hardcore Caesar, hardcore just battle for Rome, that type of thing. Everything that I learned in middle school and then I forgot. That being said, today we're going to be watching a video from the Armchair Historian. It's actually a kind of short video, only about 10 minutes. But it's D-Day, World War II, from the German perspective. So I think it's going to be kind of fun, see a little different, because I mean, German perspective, you see these ships just show up, they roll up, and as soon as the doors open, you open fire on them. But then suddenly, next thing you know, they're finally managing to push up on the shore, and just it's interesting. Well, anyway, hope you guys enjoy it. If you're not subbed, sub to my channel. I only have like 11% of my viewers subbed, so I'd really appreciate it a little bit more. I'm gonna sit back. I'm gonna shut up. Let's just get going. All right.
You're probably already familiar with the iconic Normandy landings, but chances are you're more familiar with the experiences of those who landed on the beaches as opposed to that of the defenders, and this is fairly understandable. As military historian Robert M. Citino puts it, the D-Day landings have become one of the Allies' great historical epics, whereas for the opposite side, the romance vanishes, leaving the uninspiring spectacle of a once proud military force no longer up to the challenge. As one can expect, this leaves any military history enthusiast short on information about the Axis perspective in this battle. To be absolutely clear, our intent is not to sympathize with the Nazi regime, its supporters, or its ideology. We are simply interested in uncovering the human element of the less talked about side in this near mythological clash. First, we'll need to provide context before discussing the landings at Normandy. The confrontation on the Atlantic shoreline was long in the coming. As early as autumn of 1943, Hitler had gathered his chiefs of staff and told them that all signs point to an offensive against the Western Front no later than spring 1944. But spring
Makes sense that he was able to realize that and kind of prepare. That I'm sure that made all the difference.
Spring passed and the Allies had yet to strike, making the
Oh.
atmosphere for the Germans almost unbearably tense. It didn't help that Field Marshals von Rundstedt and Rommel, the two men charged with protecting the Atlantic coast, fundamentally disagreed over the issue of tank placement. Rommel knew that because the Luftwaffe was occupied on the Eastern Front, keeping panzer divisions stationed inland, as von Rundstedt ordered them to do, was folly. The North African campaign taught him that without air superiority, moving tanks across the countryside was a near impossible task. The German soldiers, meanwhile, did the only thing they could do to mask their apprehension. They made jokes. One went something like, if you see a black plane, it's British. If you see a white plane, it's American. When you see nothing at all, it's the Luftwaffe. The others among them, who were Polish, Georgian, and Soviet prisoners impressed into Nazi service called the Ostlegionen, probably weren't in the mood for making jokes, having been dragged hundreds of miles away from their home countries. They, along with the German soldiers who had been wounded in action, made up a significant portion of soldiers stationed on the Atlantic coast. By the time the invasion broke out, some of these troops had not been fed for several days. One
wow.
soldier, Paul Goetz, who was only 17 at the time, recalls the following.
I hadn't had any food or water for 3 days, so around 6 a.m. I walked to a village and begged for milk. The French there knew me, but this time they said, "Go away, the Allies already landed with tanks."
It seems that at this juncture,
That's interesting. So, I mean, it only makes sense. The French village, they're just trying to stay alive, keep their stuff, all that. So they'll help out the Germans and work with them, type thing. But then as soon as the Allies are on the horizon, it emboldened them, I guess, to kind of stand up.
the French no longer felt the need to be as friendly to their occupiers. To make matters worse for the German side, they lacked not only food and supplies, but directive in the immediate lead-up to D-Day. Having been convinced that the Allies wouldn't dare cross the Channel in June because of poor weather conditions, Rommel had gone home to celebrate his wife's birthday and to subsequently meet with Hitler. Von Rundstedt opted not to disturb Rommel because of his mistaken belief that the paratrooper landings, which took place on June 5th, a day before the naval invasion, were a ploy to distract the Germans from the real Allied target, Calais. By the time Rommel arrived on the evening of June 6th, it was too late. All 5 of the landing sites the Allies selected were secured. Operation Fortitude, the Allied deception strategy, had done its work. Now that we understand the lead up to this momentous event, let's take a look at the Normandy landings through the German soldiers.
So we've got Utah Beach, Omaha Beach. Those were both American. Gold and Juno were both British. What's Sword?
Perspective. The location we'll be evaluating in this video is codenamed Utah Beach. It is one of the 5 landing sites that the Allies chose for their invasion. In the months preceding the landing, the soldiers stationed there had been busy at work, erecting gun emplacements and setting up stakes, tripods, barbed wire, and landmines. Streams had been dammed and the floodgates of the Douve were open to flood the land behind the beach as another deterrent. Such obstacles would not have been present in Normandy if Erwin Rommel hadn't learned from Axis mistakes at the Allied landings at Salerno, Italy in 1943. How many times must the German soldier have laid awake at night, questioning themselves, would it all be enough? It was on a night like this.
I feel like it's got to be just tense on both sides, you know? Because, like he said at the beginning of the video, you always talk about the Allies and what a struggle it was, and D-Day, it's so famous, and this and that. I mean, there were a lot of very, very famous battles and days in World War II. But this is just one of the ones that, especially Americans, we love to talk about, you know, as far as World War II goes. That being said, he's absolutely right. Imagine being on the opposite side. You know that they're going to show up. You don't know when exactly. And you have your defenses, but what about if they show up with an army that can stomp right through those defenses, you know? Are you going to have enough troops? Or is it just going to be a slaughter? Or, I mean, what's going to happen? Will they ever actually come? I mean, it had to be the same type of thought as our soldiers posted on the west coast of the United States back in World War II. They were sitting there doing drills, preparing in case the Japanese ever invaded, and they just never showed up.
Around midnight, that over 2,000 Allied bombers began wreaking havoc on the coast. The effectiveness of the bombing raid on the night of June 5th is disputable, but unlike bombing raids of the past, there was further escalation. Paratroopers also started landing in the vicinity. Skirmishes between the paratroopers and the defenders continued until the sun came up, but by that point, it became clear that the paratroopers had not come alone. A wall of ships was slowly coming into view on the horizon, and a naval bombardment commenced. Paul Goetz, the same soldier we referred to earlier, said this of the scene.
As soon as we walked over the dunes and saw thousands of ships and all those landing boats and barrage balloons, I knew the war was lost.
Wow.
Who could blame him for his hope vanishing? All around him, buildings crumbled and domesticated animals ran freely. But whether they clung to hope or not, the defenders were still prepared to put up a fight.
I mean, to be fair, that would be terrifying. Not only have you been, you know, a bombing raid happened the night before and is still happening, but now you know that paratroopers are behind your line, and now you see just what would be a line of ships on the horizon. You know, it just, God, that'd be terrifying.
Despite the chaos unleashed around them. With minimal air support, they knew it was up to them to try to stop the Allied advance. At least a few soldiers must have been glad to finally face action, liberated of that feeling of not knowing when the inevitable would come. Joseph B., a staff sergeant, wrote this.
Finally the hour has come. Although it had to happen and was foreseeable, it impressed me a lot. Of course it is not a trifle. For sure, these hours the greatest battle is taking place that the world has ever seen. Hopefully, fortune is with us now.
I understand he's kind of strung up on adrenaline and everything at the time, but I wouldn't say the greatest battle the world has ever seen, not even close. Yeah.
Many of the soldiers away from their positions tried to regroup amid the maelstrom. Those that did make it converged in fortified bunkers, equipped with mounted machine guns and anti-aircraft flak guns. However, they could only fire upon the invaders in vain, as waves and waves of troops landed on the beaches. When US soldiers inevitably closed in on the bunkers, incendiary weapons like flamethrowers and white phosphorus were used with great effect. Arms experts at globalsecurity.org write, "These weapons are particularly nasty because white phosphorus continues to burn until it disappears. If service members are hit by pieces of white phosphorus, it could burn right down to the bone."
Wow.
Just on Normandy, 5 American Medal of Honors were given in part to the usage of white phosphorus grenades. By the end of the morning on June 6th, most of the resistance points in all of the beaches had fallen to the Allies, allowing their armored divisions to support the infantry's inland advance. Much like at Utah Beach, German forces at Sword Beach had to contend with paratroopers who had dropped behind their lines and captured critical points. Helmut Rumer, a German soldier captured after hiding for 36 hours, wrote,
"We were exhausted, and we decided to hand ourselves over to the British."
At Gold Beach,
Okay, so Sword Beach was a British beach. Okay.
the defenders were severely weakened by an aerial bombardment and therefore were defeated within an hour. At Juno Beach, the Canadian troops managed to not only secure their objective, but they also marched further inland than any other landing party. Finally, at Omaha, German resistance was the most effective because of how close the bunkers were placed to the shore. But with so many troops landing, the German defenders at Omaha were also overrun.
Wow.
If you'd like to learn more about the events that brought Hitler's ruin, with some of my favorite books on the topic,
like this is all ads from here on out. Yeah, I mean, I've just never really thought about it, I guess. You always think about, the British, the Americans, I guess Canadian was the last beach. I wasn't quite sure. I knew that the British had 2 of the beaches, Americans had 2, and then there was one more. But anyway, you always think about them, the Allies, and just, there's so many movies. I mean, think about like Saving Private Ryan or something, just there's so many movies where they're stepping off the boat. As soon as the door opens, they just get slaughtered. People are dying in all over the beach. You're climbing over bodies. The sea is red. It's just, this heroic story of so many people died, but you push forward and you take it and you take down the evil Germans, the evil Nazis, But at the same time, I mean, it had to be terrifying for the other side. War is war, It just, I don't know. It's a really cool perspective. I'm glad I watched it. I hope you guys enjoyed it too. I do want to, in the future, watch a video about the paratroopers. I think that'd be a lot of fun. But anyway, let me know what you guys think. Till next time, this is Sai, and I'm out.